My name is Sarah Williams, and I'm 28 years old. 10 years ago, my mother handed me a garbage bag with my belongings and said the words that changed everything. Go learn to survive on your own. Yesterday, she sent me a Facebook message asking if she and her new husband could stay at my house because they're being evicted. I stared at her message for exactly 30 seconds before typing my response. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button. If you've ever felt abandoned by the people who were supposed to love you unconditionally, you'll definitely want to stick around for what happened next. Let me take you back to that day when I was 18. I had just finished my senior year of high school and was planning to start community college in the fall. I was excited about finally moving forward with my life, maybe studying business or marketing. I thought my mom would be proud that I had direction and goals. Instead, I came home from my graduation ceremony to find black garbage bags lined up on the front porch like funeral monuments. My mother, Linda Williams, stood there with her arms crossed, and that cold expression I'd seen countless times growing up. Pack whatever's left, she said without preamble. You're 18 now. Time to figure out life for yourself. I blinked, certain I'd misheard. What do you mean? You heard me. I've done my job raising you. You're an adult now, which means you're no longer my responsibility. She gestured at the bags. I already packed most of your stuff. Take it and go. But Mom, I just graduated. I'm starting college in 3 months. I have a job at the grocery store. I'm being responsible. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. College is a luxury you can afford on your own time with your own money. Real world doesn't care about your grades, Sarah. Time you learned that. Where am I supposed to go? Figure it out. I did when I was your age. She turned toward the front door. Your key won't work anymore. I changed the locks this morning. Standing there on that porch, holding everything I owned in garbage bags, I felt something break inside me. This wasn't about teaching independence or tough love. This was about a woman who'd resented having a daughter from the moment my father died when I was 7. My mother had spent 11 years reminding me that I was a burden, that raising me alone was a sacrifice she'd made, that everything wrong in her life could be traced back to having to support a child. Now that I was legally an adult, she was cutting me loose like damaged cargo. Mom, please, I just need a few months to save money for an apartment deposit. I'll pay rent. I'll help around the house. No, the word was final. You need to learn that life doesn't give you safety nets. I'm not going to enable you to be dependent. The irony wasn't lost on me. She was talking about dependency while she'd spent the past 3 years dating different men, always looking for someone to pay her bills and make her life easier. But pointing that out would only make things worse. What about my mail? My bank statements? Have them forwarded wherever you're going. I don't have anywhere to go. Then you better figure it out fast. I'm going out for dinner. And when I come back, I don't want to see you here. She walked into the house and closed the door behind her. I heard the new deadbolt slide into place. I stood there for maybe 10 minutes, processing what had just happened. Neighbors were starting to notice the scene. A teenage girl standing on a porch with garbage bags, clearly homeless. The embarrassment burned almost as much as the rejection. Finally, I picked up my bags and started walking. I didn't have a car. Mom had always said I could use hers when needed, but only when it suited her schedule. Now I understood why she'd never helped me get my own car. She'd been planning this. As I walked down the street where I'd grown up, dragging everything I owned in black plastic bags, I made myself a promise. Someday, I'd have everything she said I'd never achieve. Someday, she'd need something from me. I had no idea how prophetic that moment would be. My first stop was my best friend Jessica's house. We'd been close since elementary school, and I thought maybe her parents would let me crash on their couch while I figured things out. Jessica answered the door in her pajamas, looking shocked to see me standing there with garbage bags at 9 in the evening. Sarah? Oh my God, what happened? I explained the situation, trying to keep my voice steady. Jessica's face showed genuine sympathy, but when I asked if I could stay temporarily, her expression shifted to uncomfortable awkwardness. Oh, honey, I wish I could help, but you know how my parents are about guests. They're really strict about keeping the house quiet because of my college prep classes. She bit her lip. Plus, they're kind of weird about having people stay over who aren't family. Right. Jessica was heading to a prestigious private college in the fall, courtesy of her college fund. Her biggest worry was which designer outfits to pack for freshman year. Is there maybe a hotel or something you could stay at? Just for tonight? I had $237 in my checking account. Hotel rates in our area started at $80 a night. I did the math quickly. I could afford maybe 3 nights, and then I'd be completely broke. Yeah, I'll figure something out, I told her, managing a smile. Thanks anyway. My next idea was the 24-hour diner downtown. Morrison's Diner had been around forever, and I'd heard they sometimes hired high school kids for late shifts. Maybe they'd have work, and maybe they'd let me sit there for a while to think. The owner, Rose Morrison, was a 60-something woman with gray hair and kind eyes behind thick glasses. She looked me up and down when I walked in with my bags. "Honey, you look like someone who's had a rough day." "Yes, ma'am. I was wondering if you might be hiring. I just graduated high school, and I really need work." "Night shift is hard work. 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. You think you can handle that?" "I can handle anything." Rose studied me for a long moment. "You got somewhere to live? Because you look like someone who's been carrying her whole life in those bags." I hesitated, then decided honesty was my best option. "I'm working on the living situation, but I really need this job. Tell you what, there's a small room upstairs. Used to be storage, but it's got a window and it's clean. Previous tenant was my nephew, but he moved to California last month. It's not much, but it's got a bed and a dresser. I'll rent it to you for $200 a month, and I'll take it out of your first few paychecks if you need time to get on your feet." I nearly cried right there in that diner. "Really?" "Really, but I don't tolerate drama, drugs, or tardiness. Show up, do your job, pay your rent, and we'll get along fine. You start tonight." That night, I began my new life. One room above a highway diner, working the graveyard shift, serving coffee to truckers and late-night travelers. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. For the first time in my life, I had independence without someone holding it over my head. Working nights at Morrison's was like living in a different world. Between 11 p.m. and 7 a.m., the regular rules seemed suspended. I served coffee to insomniacs, truck drivers making cross-country hauls, hospital workers grabbing breakfast after 12-hour shifts, and the occasional drunk trying to sober up. The work was harder than I'd expected. My feet ached constantly from standing for 8 hours straight. I learned to balance multiple plates up one arm while pouring coffee with the other hand. I memorized the difference between over-easy and over-medium, discovered that some people have very strong opinions about their hash browns, and figured out that remembering regular customers' orders was the key to good tips. Rose turned out to be a tough but fair boss. She taught me everything: how to handle difficult customers, how to keep track of multiple tables, how to clean the grill properly. More importantly, she taught me about resilience. "Everyone who works nights has a story," she told me during one of our brief conversations. "Some are running from something, some are working toward something. The trick is knowing which one you are." I was definitely working toward something, though I wasn't entirely sure what yet. During my days off, I went to the community college to ask about enrollment. My academic advisor was sympathetic but realistic. "Sarah, given your work schedule, you'd probably want to consider online courses or evening classes. It'll take longer to get your degree, but it's doable if you're motivated." "How much longer?" "If you can handle 2 classes per semester while working full-time, maybe 4 years for an associate's degree." 4 years felt like forever at 18, but it was better than no degree at all. I enrolled in 2 evening classes, business math and introduction to accounting. The tuition ate up most of my savings, but I told myself it was an investment in my future. Balancing work and school was brutal. I'd get off work at 7 a.m., try to sleep until 2 p.m., attend classes from 3 to 6, grab dinner, and try to study before heading back to the diner at 11. I lived on energy drinks, determination, and the occasional word of encouragement from Rose. The hardest part wasn't the exhaustion. It was the loneliness and the constant reminder of how different my life was from other people my age. I'd see social media posts from former classmates, Jessica at her fancy college, others having normal freshman experiences with dorm rooms and meal plans. Meanwhile, I was serving hash browns to strangers at 3 in the morning and studying accounting principles between refilling coffee cups. But something interesting started happening around month 6. Regular customers began to know me by name. Frank, a trucker who drove the route twice a week, would ask about my classes. Diane, a nurse from the nearby hospital, would quiz me on business terminology while I served her post-shift breakfast. "You're planning to transfer to a 4-year school eventually?" Diane asked one morning. "That's the goal. Maybe study business management." "Smart girl. You're going to do well." It was the first time in months that someone had expressed confidence in my future. At home, I'd been told I was unrealistic and naive. At the diner, I was becoming someone with potential. 1 year into my new life, I'd found a routine that worked. School, work, sleep, repeat. It wasn't exciting, but I was building something. My grades were excellent. Turns out that when you're paying for your own education, you take it seriously. I'd saved enough money to buy a used Honda Civic that got me to class and back reliably. More importantly, I was gaining confidence. When difficult customers tried to intimidate me, I learned to handle them with professional firmness. When exhaustion threatened to overwhelm me, I reminded myself that this was temporary, a stepping stone to something better. The transformation wasn't just external. I could feel myself getting stronger mentally. Every month that I survived on my own, every good grade I earned, every dollar I saved was proof that my mother had been wrong about my potential. Around this time, I met Jake Thompson. He was a regular customer who worked construction and always ordered the same thing: black coffee, scrambled eggs, and wheat toast. He was quiet, polite, and always left good tips. One morning, he noticed my textbooks on the counter. "Studying business?" he asked. "Yeah, working on my associate's degree, hoping to transfer eventually." "That's impressive. Working nights and going to school can't be easy." Jake was 25, had been working construction since high school, and was one of the most genuine people I'd ever met. He didn't try to impress me with stories or possessions he didn't have. He just treated me with respect and showed genuine interest in my goals. When he finally asked me out, it was refreshingly straightforward. "Would you like to have dinner sometime? Somewhere that doesn't serve food on paper plates?" Our first date was at a small Italian restaurant downtown. Nothing fancy, but clean and warm. Jake wore a button-down shirt and had clearly made an effort. We talked about our dreams, our fears, our families, or in my case, my lack thereof. "You haven't talked to your mom since she kicked you out?" he asked, incredulous. "She made it clear I wasn't welcome unless I proved I could be successful. So far, working at a diner and going to community college doesn't meet her standards." Jake shook his head. "That's her loss. You're building something real. Most people our age are just partying their way through college on their parents' money." It was the first time someone had made me feel proud of my path instead of ashamed of it. Dating Jake while managing work and school was complicated, but he was patient with my crazy schedule. He'd bring me dinner at the diner during slow periods. When I had major exams, he'd quiz me during my breaks. He never made me feel like I had to choose between my relationship and my ambitions. By my 20th birthday, I'd completed half of my associate's degree requirements. It wasn't the traditional college experience, but I was making progress. For my birthday, Jake surprised me with a small cake and a card that read, "For the hardest working woman I know." It was the first birthday in 2 years where someone had acknowledged my existence, much less celebrated it. That night, as we sat in my tiny room above the diner, sharing cake and talking about the future, I realized something important. I was building a life that was entirely my own. No one could take it away from me, and no one could hold it over my head. The next semester, I increased my course load to 3 classes. It was ambitious given my work schedule, but I was eager to finish my degree and move forward. Jake encouraged me to push myself. "You've already proven you can handle anything," he said. "Don't hold back now when you're getting to the good part." Around this time, Rose made an announcement that initially panicked me. She was thinking about selling the diner and retiring to Florida. Where would I live? Where would I work? But Rose had already thought of that. "The buyer wants to keep most of the staff," she told me. "Miguel's a good guy with big plans. He knows you're reliable, Sarah. Plus, I told him about your college classes. He's impressed." Miguel Santos turned out to be a young entrepreneur who'd bought the diner as his first business venture. He had plans to modernize while keeping its classic charm. More importantly for me, he offered me a promotion to assistant manager with a significant pay raise. "Rose says you know this place better than anyone," he explained. "I need someone I can trust to help train new staff and handle some of the administrative work. You interested?" The promotion meant better pay, more responsibility, and valuable management experience. It also meant I could work fewer night hours and take even more classes. Absolutely. For the first time since my mother had thrown me out, I felt like I was getting ahead instead of just surviving. I was 21 years old, assistant manager of a small business, more than halfway through my associate's degree, and in a relationship with someone who supported my goals. Not bad for someone who was supposed to have learned that the real world doesn't care about effort or education. Have you ever had to prove someone wrong about your potential? Share your story in the comments below. The promotion to assistant manager changed everything for me. With my new salary and schedule, I was able to move into a real apartment, still modest, but it had a separate bedroom, a full kitchen, and most importantly, it was mine. No more living above a diner, no more shared spaces. I also enrolled in 4 classes per semester, putting me on track to finish my associate's degree by my 22nd birthday. The workload was intense, but I'd learned to thrive under pressure. Miguel turned out to be an excellent boss and mentor. He taught me about business operations, inventory management, and employee scheduling. More importantly, he treated me as a valuable member of his team rather than just hired help. You have good instincts for this, he told me after I'd suggested a more efficient system for tracking food costs. Have you thought about studying business management formally? I had. Actually. With my associate's degree nearly complete, I'd been researching four-year programs at the state university. The business school had a program designed for working adults with evening and weekend classes. Jake and I had been together for over a year now, and our relationship had only gotten stronger. He'd been promoted to crew chief on his construction team and was making good money. We'd started talking about moving in together to split expenses. I've been thinking, he said one evening as we walked through a nice neighborhood near the university. What if we rented a place closer to campus? Make it easier for you to attend classes when you transfer. That's really sweet, but those rents are probably out of our budget. Maybe not. My company just landed a huge commercial project. I'm going to be making overtime for the next 8 months. Between that and your salary, we could probably swing it. The idea of living like a normal couple in a normal apartment felt almost too good to be true. But Jake was right about the finances. Together, we could afford something much nicer than either of us could manage alone. We found a 2-bedroom apartment in a complex that was popular with university students and young professionals. It had a pool, a fitness center, and most importantly, it was only 10 minutes from campus. For the first time since leaving home, I felt like I was living like other people my age. My 22nd birthday was a milestone in more ways than one. Not only was I graduating with my associate's degree, but I'd also been accepted to the state university's business program. The graduation ceremony was small, held in the community college auditorium, but Jake was there cheering when they called my name. That evening, Miguel surprised me with a cake at the diner. Several of my regular customers were there too, people who'd watched me study during slow periods, who'd encouraged my efforts, who'd become like family over the past 3 years. Speech, someone called out. I wasn't prepared for a speech, but looking around at these people who'd supported my journey, I felt compelled to say something. 3 years ago, someone told me that the real world doesn't care about grades or education. That person was wrong. The real world absolutely cares about those things. But more importantly, it cares about persistence and the willingness to work for what you want. I raised my coffee cup. Thank you all for believing in me when I was learning to believe in myself. The transition to university was smoother than I'd expected. Having real-world work experience made me a better student than I'd been at 18. I understood the practical applications of what I was learning in ways that traditional students didn't. My professors noticed the difference too. During my first semester, my marketing professor approached me after class. Sarah, your perspective on these case studies is really valuable. You're seeing connections that other students miss. Have you considered applying for our internship program? The internship was with Henderson Marketing, a mid-sized firm downtown. It was unpaid, but offered real experience and potential networking opportunities. I was nervous about the interview, but my combination of work experience and academic performance impressed them. Most of our interns are traditional students with no work history, explained Jennifer Clark, the account manager who would supervise me. You bring a different perspective that I think will be valuable. The internship was everything I'd hoped for and more. Instead of just filing and making copies, I was researching client demographics, preparing presentation materials, and even sitting in on client meetings. I was seeing how the business concepts I was studying actually worked in practice. By the end of my junior year, Jennifer approached me with an offer that exceeded my wildest expectations. We don't usually hire interns directly, but your work has been exceptional. There's going to be an opening for a junior account coordinator position when you graduate. If you're interested, it's yours. The starting salary was more than I'd ever imagined making right out of college. It came with benefits, vacation time, and a clear path for advancement. That night, Jake and I celebrated with dinner at the nicest restaurant we'd ever been to. As we toasted my job offer, I thought about how far I'd come from that 18-year-old girl with garbage bags. I'm proud of you, Jake said, raising his glass. But I'm not surprised. I always knew you'd make it. For the first time in years, I felt like I could actually envision the future I'd been working toward. College degree, real career, stable relationship with someone who supported my goals. Life was finally starting to look like what I'd dreamed it could be. Senior year flew by in a blur of classes, internship responsibilities, and planning for the future. Jake and I had been together for 3 years now, and we'd started talking seriously about marriage after I graduated and got settled in my career. The work at Henderson Marketing was exactly what I'd hoped for. Jennifer had become both a mentor and a friend, giving me increasingly complex projects and including me in client strategy sessions. I was learning more in my internship than I had in most of my classes. You have a natural instinct for this business, Jennifer told me during one of our weekly check-ins. Marketing isn't just about creativity. It's about understanding human psychology and business strategy. You get both sides of that equation. My final semester, I was taking a full course load while working 20 hours a week at the marketing firm and still helping Miguel at the diner on weekends. It was exhausting, but I could see the finish line approaching. Graduation day was beautiful. Jake, Miguel, Rose, who'd driven up from Florida, and Jennifer were all there to celebrate. As I walked across the stage to receive my diploma, I thought about that scared 18-year-old who'd been told she'd never amount to anything. The after party was at a nice restaurant Jake had chosen. We celebrated with good food and champagne, surrounded by people who'd supported my journey. During the toasts, Rose stood up. I've known Sarah for 4 years now. I've watched her work nights, study days, and never give up on her goals. She's proof that where you start doesn't determine where you finish. That Monday, I started my new position at Henderson Marketing as a junior account coordinator. Having my own desk, business cards, and a real salary felt surreal. I was making more money than my mother had ever earned, and I was just getting started. The transition from intern to employee was seamless because I already knew the company culture and had established relationships with clients. Within 6 months, I was handling larger accounts and earning recognition for my work. Jake had been promoted again and was now supervising his own crew. He'd started talking about starting his own construction company someday. We were both building careers and planning for a future together. On my 24th birthday, Jake proposed. It wasn't a dramatic public gesture, just the two of us at home, sharing dinner and talking about our dreams. The ring was modest, but beautiful. And more importantly, it represented a partnership between equals, who'd both worked hard for what they had. I know your family situation is complicated, he said that night, but I want you to know that you'll always have a family with me. We started planning a small wedding for the following year and began shopping for a house. The idea of owning property still felt surreal, but our combined income made it possible. The real estate agent, Patricia, was impressed with our financial stability. You two have done remarkably well for your age. Let's find you something special. The house we fell in love with was a 3-bedroom colonial in a quiet neighborhood with good schools. It had an updated kitchen, hardwood floors, and a backyard perfect for the kids we hope to have someday. The price was at the top of our budget, but with both our incomes and good credit, it was manageable. Are you sure about this? Jake asked as we sat in the mortgage broker's office, signing what felt like hundreds of documents. It's a big commitment. I'm sure, I said, and I meant it. This house represented everything I'd worked for. Security, stability, a place that nobody could take away from me. We moved in on a Saturday in September. Jake's family came to help, his parents, his sister, and her kids. It was chaotic and wonderful. All these people working together to help us start our new life. That evening, after everyone had gone home and the boxes were mostly unpacked, Jake and I sat on our new couch in our new living room. He was reading construction trade magazines, and I was reviewing client presentations for work. This is nice, he said, looking around. Feels like home already. It did feel like home. For the first time in my adult life, I felt completely secure. I had a career I loved, a man who supported my ambitions, and a house that represented the stability I'd never had growing up. At work, things continued to go well. I'd been promoted to account manager and was handling major clients. Jennifer had become not just a mentor, but a close friend. You know, she said one day over lunch, I keep thinking about your story. How you built this career from nothing. Have you ever considered writing about it? I think it would inspire other people. Maybe someday, I said. Right now, I'm just focused on building what comes next. What came next was better than anything I could have imagined. Marriage to Jake, a house in a beautiful neighborhood, a career that challenged and fulfilled me. I'd taken every obstacle my mother had put in my path and turned it into an opportunity to grow stronger. Life was exactly what I'd dreamed it could be when I was sleeping in that room above the diner, studying by the light of a cheap desk lamp and wondering if I'd ever make something of myself. By my 26th birthday, my life looked nothing like what anyone would have predicted when I was 18. Jake and I had been married for a year, and our life together was everything I'd hoped it would be. We'd settled into our house, established routines, and were talking about starting a family in a year or two. At Henderson Marketing, I'd been promoted again and was now managing a team of 3 junior coordinators. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was now in a position to mentor young people the way Jennifer had mentored me. I made sure to take that responsibility seriously. The key, I told my newest team member, a recent college graduate named Amanda, is to remember that every client interaction is an opportunity to prove your value. Never just go through the motions. My salary had reached a level that still sometimes surprised me. Jake's construction business was thriving too. He'd finally taken the leap and started his own company, specializing in residential renovations. We were both living proof that hard work and smart choices could overcome almost any disadvantage. Sometimes I would walk through our house, and marvel at how far I'd come. The granite countertops in the kitchen, the hardwood floors we'd refinished ourselves, the guest room that was ready for the family we planned to have. Every room represented a dream that had become reality through persistence and determination. The only shadow in my otherwise perfect life was the complete absence of my biological family. I'd built a new family with Jake's relatives, who'd welcomed me warmly, but there was still a hole where my mother should have been. Not because I missed her specifically, but because I missed the idea of having a mother who would be proud of what I'd accomplished. Jake's mother, Carol, had stepped into that role somewhat. She was warm and supportive, genuinely interested in my career, and always ready with encouragement when I faced challenges at work. "You know," she said one day when we were shopping for wedding gifts for Jake's cousin, "I think about what you've overcome. And I'm just amazed. Not everyone could have done what you did." "I didn't really have a choice," I replied. "It was succeed or, well, there wasn't really an alternative." "That's not true. You had lots of choices. You could have given up, made excuses, blamed other people for your problems. Instead, you worked harder than anyone should have to work at 18 and made something beautiful out of it." Carol's words meant more to me than she probably realized. Having someone acknowledge the difficulty of what I'd been through, while also recognizing the strength it had required, was healing in ways I hadn't expected. At work, Jennifer had become like an older sister. She'd been promoted to senior account manager and often included me in high-level strategy meetings. "I have something to tell you," she said one afternoon, closing my office door behind her. "The partners have been talking about creating a new position, Director of Client Relations. It would mean overseeing all account managers and serving as the primary liaison for our biggest clients." "That sounds like a big responsibility." "It is. And they want to offer it to you." I stared at her. "Seriously?" "Seriously. Sarah, in 5 years you've gone from intern to one of our most valuable employees. You understand both the creative and business sides of what we do, and clients trust you. This promotion would put you on track for partnership someday." The salary that came with the new position was more than my mother had made in her best year. The title carried real authority and respect within the company. Most importantly, it was recognition that I'd become exactly what I'd always believed I could be, if I'd just been given the chance to prove it. That evening, Jake and I celebrated with champagne on our back deck, watching the sunset over our neighborhood. "Director of Client Relations," he said, raising his glass. "Has a nice ring to it." "I keep thinking about that 18-year-old girl with the garbage bags," I admitted. "She wouldn't believe this was possible." "She'd be proud of you. I know I am." As we sat there in the golden light of evening, surrounded by the life we'd built together, I felt a deep sense of contentment. I'd proven that success doesn't require perfect circumstances or family support. It requires persistence, smart choices, and the willingness to work for what you want. 3 months after my promotion, something happened that I never expected. I was checking Facebook before bed when I saw a message request from someone named Linda Williams. My finger hovered over the notification for a long moment before I opened it. "Hi, Sarah. This is your mother. I hope you're doing well. I've been thinking about you lately and wondering how you're doing. I saw some pictures of you on social media and it looks like you've done really well for yourself. I wanted to reach out because Steve and I are going through a difficult time. We're being evicted from our apartment next month and don't have anywhere to go. I know we haven't talked in years, but I was hoping you might be able to help us out. We just need a place to stay temporarily until we get back on our feet. I hope you can find it in your heart to help family when they need it most. Please let me know if this might be possible. Love, Mom." I stared at that message for a long time. Steve must be her latest husband. She'd gone through several boyfriends over the years based on what little I'd seen on social media. The woman who'd thrown me out with garbage bags was now asking for help. The irony was so perfect, it was almost amusing. Have you ever had someone who hurt you come back asking for help? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I called Jake over to read the message. His reaction was immediate and strong. "You're not seriously considering this." "I don't know what I'm considering," I admitted. Part of me wants to ignore it completely. Part of me is curious about what happened to make her desperate enough to reach out to me. "Sarah, this is the woman who abandoned you when you needed her most. She didn't care where you went or how you survived. Now she's in trouble and suddenly you're family again?" He was right, of course. But I found myself remembering that scared 18-year-old girl with nowhere to go, and wondering what had led my mother to this point. Then I remembered her exact words from that day 8 years ago. Go learn to survive on your own. I had learned. The question was, what had she learned? I spent the next 3 days thinking about my mother's message. Jake thought I was overthinking it, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed to understand what had led to this moment. Not because I felt obligated to help her, but because I was curious about the desperation that would drive someone to contact the daughter they'd discarded. During my lunch break on Thursday, I did what any modern person does when they want information. I started researching. Linda Williams wasn't hard to find on social media. Her Facebook profile was mostly public, probably because she didn't understand privacy settings. What I found was illuminating and sad in equal measure. For the past 2 years, she'd been married to Steve Collins, a man who appeared to be in his early 50s with a carefully maintained goatee and a tendency to post motivational quotes about success and financial freedom. His timeline was full of pictures of expensive dinners, weekend trips, and what looked like a comfortable lifestyle. But something had changed dramatically in recent months. The expensive restaurant photos had stopped. Instead, there were vague posts about temporary setbacks and people showing their true colors. Steve's posts had become increasingly angry and defensive, ranting about unfair business practices and people who didn't appreciate entrepreneurial vision. I scrolled back further, looking for clues. A year ago, Steve had been posting constantly about his revolutionary investment opportunity and his game-changing cryptocurrency venture. He'd shared article after article about people who'd become millionaires through digital currency trading. The pattern was clear to anyone who'd seen it before. Steve was one of those guys. The get-rich-quick entrepreneurs who jumped from one scheme to another, always convinced the next opportunity would make them wealthy beyond imagination. A little more digging revealed that Steve had a history of failed business ventures. There were hints of bankruptcy, mentions of legal troubles, and an overall pattern of big promises followed by bigger disappointments. Find anything interesting? Jake asked when I got home, noticing my laptop open to multiple browser tabs. My mother married a con artist, I said, turning the screen so he could see Steve's timeline. Look at this pattern. Big promises, expensive lifestyle while things are good, then everything falls apart and it's everyone else's fault. Jake scrolled through several posts, shaking his head. So now they're broke and evicted, and suddenly she remembers she has a successful daughter. The timing is too convenient. She didn't reach out when I graduated college. She didn't reach out when I got married or bought this house. But the moment she needs something, what are you thinking? I was thinking about how my mother had always been attracted to men who promised easy solutions to life's problems, how she'd always believed that success should come without struggle, which is why my decision to work my way through college had seemed so foolish to her. I'm thinking she found exactly the kind of person she was looking for, someone who promised wealth without work. And now that it's all fallen apart, she's looking for someone else to solve her problems. That evening, I made a decision that surprised even me. I crafted a response to my mother's message, not agreeing to help, but not shutting the door completely either. Hi, Mom. Thank you for reaching out. I'm sorry to hear you're going through a difficult time. I'd be interested in understanding more about your situation before making any decisions about how I might be able to help. Would you be willing to have a phone conversation sometime this week? Sarah. Her response came within an hour. Oh, Sarah, I'm so relieved to hear from you. Yes, I would love to talk. I'm available anytime that works for you. I have so much to tell you about everything that's happened. I know you'll understand once you hear the whole story. Thank you for being open to helping your family. Love, Mom. Reading her message, I could practically hear the relief and calculation in her voice. She was already assuming I'd agreed to help, already planning how to present her situation in the most sympathetic light possible. You're really going to talk to her? Jake asked when I showed him the exchange. I want to hear what she has to say. I want to understand how someone who was so confident about throwing away their daughter ends up desperate enough to ask that same daughter for help. Just promise me you'll remember who you're dealing with. This isn't someone who's changed or learned from their mistakes. This is someone who's run out of other options. Jake was probably right, but I was curious enough to find out for myself. We scheduled the call for Saturday morning. As the time approached, I found myself nervous in a way I hadn't expected. I hadn't heard my mother's voice in 8 years. I wasn't sure how I'd react to talking to her again. When my phone rang at exactly 10 a.m., I let it ring twice before answering. Hello, Mom. Sarah, oh honey, it's so good to hear your voice. You sound so grown up, so professional. Her voice sounded older, tired in a way I didn't remember. But the underlying tone was the same. That slightly manipulative sweetness she used when she wanted something. Thank you for agreeing to talk with me, she continued. I know things ended badly between us, But I've always regretted how we left things. That was interesting phrasing. How we left things, as if I'd had equal responsibility for the situation. Tell me about what's happening now, I said, keeping my voice neutral. For the next 20 minutes, she told me a story of victimization and bad luck. According to her version, Steve had been a successful entrepreneur who'd been targeted by jealous competitors and government regulators who didn't understand innovative business models. They'd lost everything through no fault of their own, and now they were facing eviction because the system was rigged against honest people trying to make an honest living. We just need a place to stay temporarily, while Steve gets his next venture off the ground, she explained. He has some amazing opportunities lined up. Really revolutionary stuff. We just need a few months to get back on our feet. Not once did she acknowledge any responsibility for their situation. Not once did she express genuine remorse for how she'd treated me. The entire conversation was framed around her current needs and how I could help solve her problems. What about work? I asked. Are either of you employed right now? Well, Steve is between projects at the moment, focusing on getting his new business launched. And I've been helping him with that, so I haven't had time for a regular job. But once things get going again, we'll be fine. Translation. Neither of them had jobs, and they had no immediate prospects for income. Mom, I need to ask you something directly. Do you remember what you said to me the day you kicked me out? Silence on the other end of the line. You told me to go learn to survive on my own. You said the real world doesn't care about education or hard work. Do you remember that? Sarah, I was trying to teach you independence. Everything I did was because I wanted you to be strong. The revisionist history was breathtaking. She was actually trying to claim credit for my success. I see. And now you think I should use that independence and strength to solve your problems? Family helps family. Sarah, that's what families do. There it was. The same woman who'd refused to be family when I needed help was now invoking family obligation when she needed help. What do you think will happen next? Drop your predictions in the comments below. After ending the call with my mother, I sat in my kitchen for a long time, processing what I'd heard. The conversation had confirmed everything I'd suspected. She hadn't changed, hadn't learned, and wasn't taking responsibility for her choices. But more importantly, it had clarified something for me. This wasn't really about whether I should help her. This was about whether I was going to let her rewrite the history of our relationship and manipulate me into enabling her poor choices. That afternoon, Jake and I went for a long walk through our neighborhood. It was a beautiful Saturday, and seeing the well-maintained houses, the families playing in their yards, the evidence of stability and prosperity all around us, reminded me of how far I'd come. So what's your gut telling you? Jake asked as we paused at a small park where children were playing on swings. My gut is telling me that she's exactly the same person she was 8 years ago. She's just in a different situation now. And I think I know what I want to do, but I want to be absolutely certain before I do it. Over the next few days, I did more research into Steve Collins and his business ventures. What I found was even worse than I'd initially suspected. Steve wasn't just a failed entrepreneur. He was someone who'd made a pattern of taking other people's money and losing it through poor decisions and questionable practices. His most recent venture had involved convincing people to invest in his cryptocurrency trading operation. According to several online complaints I found, investors had lost significant amounts of money when Steve's proven strategies turned out to be nothing more than gambling with other people's savings. My mother, based on her social media posts from the past 2 years, hadn't just married Steve, she'd been one of his most enthusiastic promoters. She'd shared his posts about the trading operation, convinced friends to invest, and publicly praised his financial genius. Now I understood the full scope of their situation. It wasn't just that Steve's latest scheme had failed. It was that they'd probably burned bridges with everyone in their social circle. My mother was reaching out to me not because she suddenly valued our relationship, but because she'd run out of other people to exploit. The realization was both liberating and sad. Liberating because it meant I didn't need to feel guilty about whatever decision I made. Sad because it confirmed that my mother really hadn't learned anything from the consequences of her choices. Wednesday evening, I made my decision. I sat down at my laptop and crafted a response that I'd been thinking about for days. Hi, Mom. Thank you for the phone conversation. I've had time to think about everything you told me, and I've done some research into your situation. I understand that you and Steve are facing financial difficulties due to the failure of his business ventures. However, I won't be able to provide housing or financial assistance. When I was 18, you told me that I needed to learn to survive on my own because the real world doesn't give people safety nets. You were right about that. I did learn to survive on my own, and in the process, I learned that real success comes from hard work, education, and making responsible choices. not from looking for shortcuts or depending on other people to solve your problems. Since you were so confident that I needed to figure out life on my own, I'm sure you'll understand that you need to do the same thing. I wish you the best with your situation. Sarah. I read the message 3 times before sending it. It was firm but not cruel, honest but not vindictive. Most importantly, it turned her own philosophy back on her without being explicitly harsh about it. Jake read it over my shoulder before I hit send. "That's perfect," he said. "It says everything without saying too much. Think she'll respond?" "Oh, she'll respond. The question is whether it'll be anger or more manipulation." We didn't have to wait long. My phone buzzed with a notification 30 minutes later. Her response was longer and more desperate than I'd expected. "Sarah, I can't believe you would be so cold to your own mother. I know we had our differences when you were younger, but everything I did was because I loved you and wanted you to be strong. I never imagined you would hold such a grudge over something that happened so long ago. You're the only family I have left who's in a position to help. Steve has several opportunities lined up, really promising ones. And we just need a temporary place to stay while they develop. I'm not asking for charity. We can pay you back as soon as we get on our feet. I raised you better than this. Family is supposed to help family, and I hope you'll reconsider this harsh response. We could really use your help, and I know deep down you're a good person who wouldn't let her family become homeless." The message hit every manipulation button she could find. Guilt, family obligation, promises to pay me back, claiming credit for my character, and even threats about homelessness. She was pulling out all the stops. But reading it, I felt nothing except a kind of detached observation. These were the same tactics she'd always used, the same emotional manipulation that had made my childhood so difficult. The difference was that now I could see them clearly for what they were. I showed the message to Jake. He read it with increasing disbelief. She's really going all in with the guilt trip. Notice how she's framing Steve's opportunities like they're legitimate business prospects instead of whatever scheme he's planning next. Are you going to respond? I thought about it for a moment, then decided that some conversations deserved to end definitively. No, I said what I needed to say. Anything else would just give her more ammunition for manipulation. Over the next week, she sent 2 more messages. The first was angry, accusing me of being selfish and ungrateful. The second was a guilt trip about how disappointed my father would be if he could see how I was treating my family. I read both messages, but didn't respond to either. Some chapters of your life deserve to be closed permanently. 2 weeks after my last communication with my mother, something happened that put everything into perspective. I was reading the morning news when I saw an article that made my blood run cold. Local couple charged in investment fraud scheme. The photo showed Steve Collins in a mugshot, looking considerably less confident than in his social media posts. According to the article, Steve had been arrested and charged with multiple counts of investment fraud related to his cryptocurrency operation. Investigators had traced the flow of investor money and determined that Steve had been using new investments to pay fake returns to earlier investors while funding an expensive lifestyle for himself and his wife. But here was the detail that made everything clear. My mother had been arrested as well. She was charged as an accomplice for helping recruit investors and promote the fraudulent scheme. I read the article twice, processing the implications. My mother wasn't just the victim of Steve's bad business decisions. She was an active participant in defrauding other people. The friends she'd convinced to invest had lost their life savings because they trusted her endorsement. I called the law firm that handled Henderson Marketing's legal affairs and asked to speak with one of their criminal defense attorneys. After explaining the situation, his advice was crystal clear. "Ms. Williams, under no circumstances should you have any contact with people who are under criminal investigation for financial crimes. Even if charges are dropped later, any communication could be interpreted as coordination or obstruction of justice. You made the right decision by not responding to their requests for help." That evening, I showed the article to Jake. He read it with a mixture of shock and vindication. So they weren't just broke and desperate. They were fleeing criminal prosecution. And they wanted to use my house as a hideout. "Sarah, what if you'd said yes? What if the police had come looking for them at your address?" I hadn't considered that possibility. But Jake was right. Getting involved with my mother and Steve could have jeopardized everything I'd built. My career, my reputation, even my freedom if authorities had decided I was helping them evade justice. The next few weeks brought more revelations as the local news covered the investigation. Steve's scheme had defrauded over 40 people out of nearly $500,000. Many of the victims were retirees who'd invested their savings based on promises of guaranteed returns. My mother's role had been significant. She'd hosted investment parties at their apartment, used her personal relationships to build trust with potential victims, and actively promoted Steve's credibility to people who might otherwise have been skeptical. One detail particularly stuck with me. According to prosecutors, the couple had used investor money to fund a lifestyle that included expensive dinners, weekend trips, and luxury purchases, all while telling investors that their money was being carefully managed in legitimate trading operations. The expensive lifestyle I'd seen documented on their social media hadn't been the result of successful investments. It had been funded by stealing other people's life savings. 3 months later, the case was resolved. Steve was sentenced to 6 years in federal prison. My mother received a suspended sentence and 3 years of probation in exchange for cooperating with prosecutors and helping them recover some of the stolen money. According to the final news article, investigators had recovered about 40% of the lost funds, which would be distributed to victims. Steve's assets, including the luxury items he'd bought during the height of the scheme, had been seized and sold. I felt a mixture of relief and sadness reading the final coverage. Relief that the legal process was over and that I'd avoided any involvement. Sadness for the victims who'd lost their savings, and for my mother, who'd finally faced real consequences for her choices. But mostly, I felt vindicated. The woman who told me that the real world doesn't care about education or hard work had just learned that the real world also doesn't care about shortcuts, schemes, or looking for someone else to solve your problems. That evening, Jake and I sat on our back deck, watching the sunset over our neighborhood. In the distance, I could see other couples and families enjoying their evening routines, walking dogs, tending gardens, living the kind of stable, peaceful lives that come from making good choices over time. "Do you think she's learned anything from this?" Jake asked. "I doubt it. People like that usually blame everyone except themselves. She'll probably spend the next 3 years complaining about unfair prosecutors and bad luck." "Any regrets about how you handled things?" I thought about it seriously. "No. She taught me something valuable, even if she didn't mean to." "What's that?" "She taught me that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable someone's self-destructive behavior, even if that someone is family." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, I felt a deep sense of peace. I'd proven that success doesn't require perfect circumstances or family support. It requires persistence, smart choices, and the wisdom to recognize when someone is trying to drag you down into their chaos. My mother had intended her words as punishment. Go learn to survive on your own. Instead, they'd become the foundation of everything good in my life. Life moved forward in the months following my mother's legal troubles. At work, I'd been given even more responsibilities as director of client relations, and Henderson Marketing was thriving. Jake's construction business had grown to the point where he was employing 8 people and considering expanding into commercial projects. We'd started seriously discussing having children, maybe trying to get pregnant sometime in the next year. Our house felt ready for a family, our careers were stable, and we both felt emotionally prepared for the challenge and joy of raising kids. One evening in late fall, almost a year after my mother's arrest, I was checking my personal email when I saw something that made me pause. A message from an address I didn't recognize with the subject line, "Thank you from a victim." I almost deleted it, thinking it was spam, but something made me open it instead. "Dear Ms. Williams, my name is Margaret Chen, and I am one of the people who lost money in Stephen Collins's investment scheme. During the investigation, I learned that Linda Williams is your mother, and I wanted to reach out to you personally. I know this might seem strange, but I wanted you to know that several of us victims are aware that you had no contact with your mother during the time of the fraud, and that you refused to help her when she asked. I want you to know how much we appreciate that you didn't enable her behavior or help her avoid the consequences of her actions. Many of us are elderly, and we lost savings that we'll never be able to replace. Your mother convinced us to trust Stephen by vouching for his character and sharing stories about their successful lifestyle. If you had helped them continue that facade, more people might have been hurt. Thank you for having the integrity to stay away from their criminal activity, even when it was your own family asking for help. Sincerely, Margaret Chen." I read the message twice, processing the unexpected gratitude from someone I'd never met. Margaret was thanking me for something I'd done for entirely selfish reasons, protecting myself from my mother's manipulation. But her perspective made me realize something I hadn't fully understood before. By refusing to help my mother, I hadn't just protected myself. I'd potentially protected other people from becoming victims of whatever scheme Steve would have cooked up next. I showed the message to Jake. He read it thoughtfully. "That's profound," he said. "You thought you were just setting boundaries with your mother, but you were actually preventing her from hurting more people. I didn't think of it that way at the time. That's what makes it even better." You did the right thing because it was right, not because you were calculating the broader consequences. Margaret's message prompted me to think more deeply about the ripple effects of our choices. My mother's decision to kick me out at 18 had seemed cruel and pointless at the time, but it had forced me to develop independence, resilience, and the ability to recognize manipulation, skills that had served me well when she'd tried to exploit me years later. Her cruelty had accidentally given me the tools I needed to resist her later attempts at manipulation. A few weeks later, I received another unexpected contact. This time it was a LinkedIn message from someone named David Martinez, who identified himself as a journalist working on a story about financial fraud and family dynamics. Ms. Williams, I'm writing an article about how family members respond when relatives are involved in criminal activity. I understand you chose not to assist your mother when she was involved in Stephen Collins' investment fraud. Would you be willing to speak with me about your decision and the factors that influenced it? I declined the interview. I had no interest in being part of a news story about my family's criminal activity, but the journalist's interest made me realize that my situation wasn't unique. Probably thousands of people every year have to decide whether to help family members who are involved in questionable or illegal activities. The easy answer is always to help family, regardless of circumstances. But that's not always the right answer, especially when helping means enabling destructive behavior or becoming complicit in hurting other people. Around this time, Jake and I received news that we'd been trying for. I was pregnant. The pregnancy test showed positive on a Tuesday morning in January, exactly 2 years after my mother had first contacted me asking for help. As we celebrated the news and began planning for our future as parents, I thought about the kind of family we wanted to create for our child. A family based on love and support, yes, but also on honesty, accountability, and healthy boundaries. What if our kid makes terrible choices someday? Jake asked one evening as we painted what would become the nursery. What if they get involved with the wrong people or make decisions that hurt others? Then we'll love them enough to let them face the consequences, I said. Real love sometimes means refusing to enable someone's destructive behavior, even if they're your own child, especially if they're your own child. I thought about my mother's approach to parenting, the conditional love, the manipulation, the willingness to discard me when I didn't meet her expectations. Then I thought about the kind of parent I wanted to be. I wanted to be someone who provided genuine support while also teaching responsibility. Someone who loved unconditionally while still maintaining healthy boundaries. Someone who prepared their child for independence while also being a safe place to land when life got difficult. The difference between my approach and my mother's would be that my love wouldn't depend on my child's success or failure, but my willingness to enable poor choices would have limits, regardless of how much I loved them. That spring, as my pregnancy progressed and we prepared for our first child, I felt more grateful than ever for the path my life had taken. The difficult years after being kicked out had taught me lessons I never could have learned in a comfortable, supported environment. I'd learned to work for what I wanted, to persist through obstacles, to recognize manipulation, and to trust my own judgment even when family pressured me to make different choices. These weren't lessons I'd wish on anyone, but they were skills that had served me well and would continue to serve me as a parent, professional, and human being. My mother had thrown me away because she thought I'd never amount to anything. Instead, she'd accidentally given me the greatest gift possible, the necessity of becoming strong enough to build my own life on my own terms. Our daughter, Emma, was born on a beautiful September morning. Holding her for the first time, looking into her perfect little face, I felt a love deeper than anything I'd ever experienced. But along with that overwhelming love came a fierce protectiveness and a determination to give her everything I'd never had, starting with a mother who would never abandon her. The first few months of parenthood were a whirlwind of sleepless nights, endless feedings, and the constant wonder of watching this tiny person grow and change. Jake was an amazing father from day one, patient and gentle and completely devoted to our little family. When Emma was 3 months old, something happened that I'd been half expecting since her birth. I received another Facebook message from my mother. This one was different in tone from her previous communications. "Sarah, I heard through mutual acquaintances that you had a baby. Congratulations. I would love to meet my granddaughter and be part of her life. I know things have been difficult between us, but surely a new baby is a chance for all of us to start fresh. I've learned a lot from my experiences over the past few years, and I think I could be a good grandmother if you'd give me the chance. I understand if you have reservations, but I hope you'll consider letting me see Emma. She's my only grandchild, and I promise I've changed. Love, Mom." I stared at the message, holding Emma in my arms as she slept peacefully against my chest. The audacity was breathtaking. After everything that had happened, She thought the birth of my daughter would somehow erase the past and give her automatic access to our family. Jake read the message over my shoulder. What are you thinking? I'm thinking about what kind of people I want around our daughter. And I want her surrounded by people who demonstrate integrity, honesty, and healthy relationships. People who take responsibility for their choices and treat others with respect. Your mother doesn't fit that description. No, she doesn't. And Emma deserves better. I thought about all the ways my mother could potentially harm Emma as she grew up. The manipulation, the conditional love, the tendency to prioritize her own needs over everyone else's. Even if she genuinely changed, which I doubted, the risk wasn't worth taking. More importantly, allowing my mother into Emma's life would send a message that actions don't have lasting consequences, that family relationships can be discarded and picked up again at will, and that love doesn't require respect or healthy boundaries. Those weren't lessons I wanted to teach my daughter. My response was brief but final. Mom, I appreciate your congratulations. However, I won't be including you in Emma's life. My daughter deserves to be surrounded by people who demonstrate stability, integrity, and healthy relationships. I hope you understand that choices have consequences, and these are the consequences of the choices you've made over the years. I wish you well, but please don't contact me again. Her response came within hours, as I'd expected. It was long, angry, and full of accusations about my coldness and ingratitude. She threatened to seek grandparents' rights, accused me of being vindictive, and claimed that I was depriving Emma of family. I read it once, then blocked her on all social media platforms and marked her email address as spam. Some conversations don't deserve to continue. That evening, as I rocked Emma to sleep, I thought about the kind of family history I wanted to give her. Not the biological family I'd been born into, but the chosen family Jake and I were creating. Emma would grow up knowing she was loved unconditionally. She'd have two parents who worked hard, treated each other with respect, and built their success through education and ethical choices. She'd be surrounded by Jake's family, who'd already embraced her completely, and by the chosen family of friends and mentors who'd supported us over the years. Most importantly, she'd grow up understanding that love and respect go together, that healthy relationships require boundaries, and that family isn't defined by biology, but by the quality of care and support people provide for each other. When Emma was 6 months old, we had her baptized in a small ceremony surrounded by the people who truly mattered to us. Jake's parents, his sister and her family, Jennifer and her husband, Miguel and his wife, even Rose, who flew up from Florida for the occasion. Looking around at all these people who'd chosen to be part of our lives, who'd supported us through challenges and celebrated our successes, I felt overwhelmed with gratitude. This was what real family looked like. Not perfect people, but people who showed up consistently with love and support. Rose pulled me aside after the ceremony. "Your little girl is lucky to have you as her mother," she said. "You're going to raise her right." "I hope so. I want to give her everything I never had." "You will. But more importantly, you'll give her the strength to build her own life if she ever needs to. That's the greatest gift a parent can give." Rose was right. The independence and resilience I'd been forced to develop would serve me well as a parent. I'd be able to love Emma completely while also preparing her to be strong and self-sufficient. I'd give her the security of unconditional love combined with the tools she'd need to build her own success. She'd never have to choose between family support and personal growth, because she'd have both. That night, as Jake and I put Emma to bed in her nursery, the room we'd painted together in the house we'd bought with money we'd earned through our own hard work, I felt a deep sense of completion. I'd built the life I'd dreamed of when I was 18 and scared and alone. But more than that, I'd built the foundation for Emma to have an even better life, surrounded by love and support, and the knowledge that she was valued for who she was, not what she could provide for others. My mother's cruelty had accidentally taught me what not to do as a parent. Emma would benefit from every hard lesson I'd learned about love, boundaries, and the difference between enabling and supporting. 5 years later, Emma was a bright, confident little girl who filled our house with laughter and wonder. She was curious about everything, kind to everyone she met, and absolutely fearless in the way that children can be when they grow up feeling completely secure in their parents' love. Jake's construction business had grown into one of the most respected firms in the area. My career had continued to flourish as well. I'd been promoted to Vice President of Client Relations and was being considered for a partnership at Henderson Marketing. We'd moved to a larger house in an even better neighborhood, with excellent schools and a backyard perfect for Emma's elaborate games of make-believe. Our life was everything I dreamed it could be when I was sleeping in that room above the diner, studying by the light of a cheap desk lamp. One Saturday morning, as I was reading the local newspaper while Emma played in the backyard and Jake worked in his workshop, I saw a small article that caught my attention. Local woman sentenced for probation violation. The brief article explained that Linda Collins, she'd taken Steve's name, had been sentenced to 18 months in prison for violating the terms of her probation by attempting to participate in another investment scheme. According to the report, she'd been caught trying to recruit investors for a new venture, despite being explicitly prohibited from any involvement in financial solicitation as part of her probation agreement. I read the article twice, feeling a mixture of sadness and vindication. 5 years after her arrest, she still hadn't learned. She was still looking for shortcuts, still trying to make money through schemes instead of honest work, still unwilling to accept that actions have consequences. "Find something interesting?" Jake asked, coming in from the garage with sawdust in his hair. I showed him the article. He read it and shook his head. "Some people never learn?" "No, they don't." That afternoon, as I watched Emma play with the neighbor children in our backyard, I thought about the different paths people choose in life. Some people, when faced with obstacles, work harder and make better choices. Others keep making the same mistakes, expecting different results. My mother had chosen the second path. Even after facing criminal charges, losing her freedom, and destroying relationships with everyone who'd tried to help her, she was still looking for the easy way out. I'd chosen differently. When faced with rejection and abandonment, I'd decided to build something better. When confronted with my mother's manipulation, I'd chosen to protect what I'd built rather than risk it for someone who'd never valued me. Those choices had led to this moment. A beautiful Saturday afternoon in my own backyard, watching my daughter play while my husband worked on a project he loved, surrounded by the security and happiness we'd created together. That evening, after Emma was asleep, Jake and I sat on our back deck with glasses of wine, enjoying the peaceful end to a perfect day. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd made different choices?" Jake asked. "If you'd helped your mother when she first asked?" "Sometimes. But I think I know what would have happened. She would have used our house as a base for whatever scheme Steve was planning next. We probably would have been investigated by the police. At minimum, our reputation would have been damaged. At worst, we could have been charged as accessories. And Emma? Emma would have grown up seeing her grandmother get away with hurting people. She would have learned that family loyalty means enabling bad behavior. She would have been exposed to manipulation and chaos instead of stability and integrity. No regrets? I thought about it seriously. None. My mother taught me the most valuable lesson of my life, even though she didn't mean to, which was that the people who truly love you want you to succeed and become your best self. They don't try to tear you down or hold you back. They don't make their love conditional on your willingness to solve their problems or enable their mistakes. I looked through the window at Emma's bedroom, where a nightlight cast a gentle glow. Emma will grow up knowing that she's loved unconditionally, but also that love doesn't mean never having to face consequences for poor choices. She'll understand that real family supports each other's growth, not each other's destructive behavior. Think you'll ever hear from your mother again? Maybe when she gets out of prison. But if I do, I'll be ready. I'd learned to survive on my own, just like she'd told me to. But more than that, I'd learned to thrive. I'd built a life based on hard work, education, ethical choices, and healthy relationships. Most importantly, I'd learned that sometimes the greatest act of love is refusing to enable someone's self-destructive behavior, even when that someone is family. My mother had thrown me away with the words, "Go learn to survive on your own." I had learned. I'd learned to survive, to succeed, and to build something beautiful out of the wreckage of her rejection. 10 years later, when she desperately needed help, she'd reached out to the daughter she'd discarded. And I'd responded with the wisdom she'd accidentally taught me. I'd looked at her message for exactly 30 seconds, remembering everything she'd put me through, everything I'd overcome, and everything I'd built without her help. Then I'd typed 4 words that perfectly captured everything she'd taught me about life, consequences, and the importance of learning to stand on your own. Go learn to survive on your own. If this story resonated with you, make sure to like and subscribe for more stories about overcoming family dysfunction and building the life you deserve. Remember, you have the power to write your own ending, no matter how your story began. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members? Share your experiences in the comments below. Your story might help someone else who's facing a similar situation. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Sometimes the best response to people who abandon you is to build a life so strong that their return becomes irrelevant.